3rd, 2009 Board of Selectmen meeting. Start with the flag.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Nothing at the same.
Mr. Nichols?
Nothing, thanks.
Okay, I don't have on anything either. Our first appointment tonight is Richard Ingram from the New Hampshire State, about the New Hampshire State retirement. Where you'll be more comfortable. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
We've been following you in the news quite a bit, so that's great to have someone like you there.
Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes that's a bad thing. But happy to be here and appreciate the invitation from the town manager to do so. It's particularly nice. I do this in other venues, so it's good to have a 7-minute ride home instead of an hour or two from somewhere else. So maybe if I'll just make a couple of comments. I'm really here to answer your questions, hear what's on your mind, take back to the Board of Trustees any feedback that you may have. Certainly as you indicated, the retirement system has been in the news from time to time, not just recently, but for a number of years now. And I think that one of the messages I certainly want to deliver is that I firmly believe that the times of turmoil are over. There are certainly challenges that are in front of us, whether they're fiscal or otherwise, but I would just point out, I've been at the retirement system for 6 months now, and in the last, that means I'm pretty long tenured there. In the last 24 months, there have been 5 people that sat in the chair, that I'm sitting in now. So I think that people are consistently hearing from me the commitment that I've personally made, to this job, and I'm going to be in it for the long haul. And you all know where I live, so if I screw it up, you'll know where to find me. I think there has been, just in the past couple of days, some preliminary information about how we're doing, with our investments and the like for the fiscal year that's just ended. Apparently, I did make it onto Channel 9 a few minutes ago, and I apologize for that. I guess it's safe to say, we all know that the world financial markets have been through an extraordinary time, not just in the last 6 months, but for the year or more prior to that. And if you look back over the last 10 years, it's essentially been a lost decade in terms of investment return. The good news is we roughly matched our benchmark. The bad news is our benchmark came to just a little bit above zero. So we're no different than a lot of other organizations like ourselves. If you look at similar funds for the past year, the fiscal year that just ended, many are reporting losses in the 19, 20, 23, 27% range. I had been talking on a preliminary basis, looking at roughly a 20% loss. I found out after I went on TV that it's probably going to be a little bit less than that, but I'd rather come back and tell people I was on the high side on that than on the low side. But I think we're well positioned. The board, the legislature, and some other folks have done a number of things over the past few years to take steps that will help the long-term stability of the system. And certainly that doesn't mean that there's not a lot more work to do, but I think the pieces are falling into place to do that. And I guess with that, maybe I can, like I said,
We can open it up to questions.
Absolutely.
I think that might be the best way to go.
Absolutely.
Okay. Would you like to start, Mr. Nichols?
Sure. You mentioned that our asset level is down about 20% year on year as of June 30th. I believe I read recently in the paper, as of June 30th, 2008, I believe we were about 68% funded against future liabilities, and my understanding that the impact of the 20% brings us down to about a 59% funding against future liabilities. How does that affect going forward the rates that the employers, in other words the town, Obviously, that's a pretty big deal, but I suspect that there's some smoothing in terms of the changes and whatever. So if you could explain that, I'd appreciate it.
There absolutely is. We will, the fiscal year that just ended, the 2009 fiscal year, is one of the years in which we do our regular biennial valuations, where the actuary comes in and does the things that they do to determine rates for the next biennium. We have a legislative mandate to have those rates finalized and communicated by next September. But I will tell you that, as the actuary does their work through the balance of the summer and fall, from late fall into the winter, we will be more formally, my expectation is, sharing information about where we see the rates heading. All of that's a long way to say I can't tell you, what to expect exactly. They will absolutely have to go up. There's no question about that. The magnitude of how much they have to go up, I think, has moderated quite a bit over the last several months from what we might have expected. It's really too early to predict, what that might be. But there are, in the calculations of the rates, there are smoothing effects that come in, so that you don't get
overreact to 1 year
up and down. In addition, there's a 5-year smoothing of results that we use. And overlaying that, there's what we call a corridor or a collar, which serves to minimize, to a certain extent, the effects of smoothing, so that in a really bad year, like we have just had, we will not push out to the out years quite as much. As it's not taking this year's loss and divide it by 5 because of the magnitude of the gap. It will, if you were to put me to it, I would guess that probably 40% of this year's losses will get into the rates where typically it would have been 20%. But that's the sort of, that will all come into math during the course of the
second question, the last assumption that I saw, and this may not be current, I haven't looked at this stuff recently, but the investment return assumption that the retirement plan was going on was 8.5%. Is that still the case, or?
It is right now. We will be redoing what we call our asset liability model later this year. That will be one of the questions that we address.
Because it just strikes me that that's very overly optimistic going forward.
It certainly is. We are on the high side of public pension plans in the States. But I would temper that with this observation. There's, people look at that and focus on that and say, geez, who's making 8.5%? And that's a very fair question. What's more important sort of in the actuarial numbers is the spread between what that assumption is and the underlying inflation assumption, because the gap between those two numbers is what you are looking to make on your investment portfolio to pay benefits. So yes, we are on the high side on the return assumption, the 8.5%. We are also high on the inflation assumption at 4.5%. So we're looking at a 4% gap that we're looking to fund through investment performance. Still substantial, but not quite as out on the fringes as just looking at the 8.5% might lead us to conclude.
One final question, which is kind of reporting structure, organizational structure, because I'm not sure that I understand this correctly. For example, to whom, what entity or whatever do you report as executive director?
I report to the Board of Trustees.
Okay.
The New Hampshire retirement system is a component unit of state government, but we are separate and apart from the other.
Don't report up through the executive branch.
No, I am not a governor and council appointment. Even though the commissioner of HHS and Commissioner Wren and others and I are sort of on the same level in the state org chart, if you will. I report independently to my board. The board has 14 members that are appointed to represent the various constituencies to sort of make up the stakeholders of the retirement system. And I am a contract employee, if you will, with those, with the Board of Trustees.
I realize that you don't have